Welcome back to One American Baseball Podcast. This is episode 26. We're recording this on Monday, July 21st. The Guardians have a four-game series coming up against the Orioles. Baltimore's coming to town, and the Reds are playing somebody this week. But
We are in the
yeah,
nation's capital, Chris.
yeah, they're in the district this week. That's my bad. But we have a series of baseball to talk about. We have the weekend series. Guardians took 2 out of 3 against the A's. So once we get through that, we're going to we have a really fun mailbag segment prepared for today. So that should be super fun. And we're going to talk about conspiracy theory that both of us buy into. So stick around till the end of the episode. Should be super fun. So. Yeah, let's get right into it. Jaden, how are you feeling about your Red Legs right now?
Pretty good after one series out of the All-Star break. And typically that's not how I feel about this team coming out of the All-Star break. Historically, they've been a team that's fallen flat on their faces coming out of the break. And I was pretty nervous that they were going to do that again this time around. We were going into New York to play the Mets. They are the best home team in the MLB at the current moment. So, going to their stadium and playing them made me nervous. But we took two of three against them, which I was really happy with. I was really pleased with this series, and I'm going to get into that. We had a look at the sweep yesterday. I'm gonna say it was umpire aided. The Juan Soto was up in the eighth inning, the bottom of the eighth. The game was tied at that point, or yeah, it was the bottom of the eighth inning. The game was tied at that point. Brent Suter threw him two perfectly placed pitches on the outside corner of the plate. Neither of them got called by the home plate umpire. Both of them very obviously strikes. Soto walks. He didn't swing at either of those pitches either, so hypothetically, those two pitches could have rung him up, but they didn't. And so he walks and comes around to score the game winning run. I looked at the umpire scorecard just to see how much favorability it was for the Mets. It was 0.93 runs for the Mets based on the umpire scorecard, and the Reds lost the game by a run. So, considering the data and then the situation in which Soto was given that walk, it definitely feels like we got more than screwed over by the umpires and that they probably gifted that game to the Mets. I mean, it's hard to say, if Soto strikes out, does the game end up going a similar fashion? Do the Reds score? Do the Mets score in the bottom of the ninth? That game could still end plenty of ways. But the big thing is that we took the series in Queens this weekend. Um, you know, it's really hard to sweep a good team, and it's nearly impossible to do it when you also have to beat the home plate umpire. So, taking two of three, I'm fine with. Yesterday's game, we could have lost by 8, and I wouldn't have cared. Uh, Actually, losing by 1 made it sting a little bit more, but really, yesterday's game would have just been icing on the cake. Really, it was a very complete series from the Reds. Good quality at bats all series. I really like to see that. They were working deep into counts. I mean, they had Mets pitchers pretty deep into their pitch counts, like 5 innings in, which is not something that this team has done super well all season. So that was really good to see. They were hitting the ball to all fields, which is good. So, I'm hoping that's a pattern that we see continue here in DC. Now that we're in DC, though, you have to go and take two from the Nationals. The Nationals are not a very good baseball team this year. I mean, they have a lot of young talent, but they're not playing that well. I think uh, I don't know their record off the top of my head, but it's not good. I think they're about 20 games under 500. So, you can't go in there and do what you did going into the All-Star break, which is play to the level of your competition like you did against the Marlins and the Rockies. You have to take two of three in DC because I think, after taking two from the Mets on the road, if you win this series, you sort of force the front office's hand into being buyers at this deadline. They can't, without losing the fan base and probably not in good conscience, be sellers or go half and half at the deadline if you win two in New York and then you win two in DC. But like I've said, this team has shown time and time again that this season they're going to play to the level of their competition. The Nationals took a series from them early in May. Granted, that that was still the team that was very inconsistent when it came to hitting the baseball and, scoring runs, and they've sort of found their stride in that manner. But, um, you know, they even now that they found their stride, just like they did going into the All-Star break, they played to the level of their competition. But maybe the All-Star break has reset them, and coming out of this break, they play with a little more fire because they really know what's at stake here in the next week with the trade deadline, and then in the next 2 months with the playoff race. And that's really my takeaways from the Mets series. I do think we need someone to replace Taylor Rogers. Um, you know, the Giants are eating $6 million of this contract, or it would have been a real. I mean, we didn't give up a player in the trade. I think we just gave up cash, but it still wouldn't have been a good trade, even if that's all we gave up, because he's been pretty bad this season. The ERA doesn't look terrible, but if you watch the games and look at some of the underlying stats, he's been really bad. He's 10th percentile in walk rate. He's -3 in pitching run value. He's got a 5.2 walks per nine, which is for a reliever is astronomical. You can't have a reliever doing that. And you're basically down a bullpen arm because Tito, understandably so, is reluctant to use him. He only uses him in very low leverage situations. And so you don't have a guy that you can go to in a close game in the sixth or seventh inning because Taylor Rogers isn't that guy right now. He's walking too many guys. He's giving up too many free base runners, and that is going to hurt us more oftentimes than not. Now, thankfully, in the Mets series, it didn't end up hurting us, but it's got the chance to later on in the season, and I think we definitely need to look to replace him at the trade deadline. I think is probably the biggest need for this team at this point. And then my last takeaway from this week is that Spencer Steer is playing Gold Glove level defense at first, and no one is really talking about it. He's worth 3 outs above average at first base. That's sixth in the MLB for qualified first baseman, and he's worth 5 defensive runs saved at first base, and that's second behind Matt Olson. So if Matt Olson isn't in the NL, I think there's a legit conversation to be had about Spencer Steer winning a Gold Glove at first base. And for someone who doesn't know the Reds that well, they might not think that's super impressive, but Spencer Steer, for most of his career, has been a utility guy. He's a guy that won't play great defense, but he'll play serviceable defense at a lot of different positions. You can stick him in left field, stick him at second, third. He was a shortstop in college, but he's played really good defense at first base, and it's made a huge difference for this team because first base coming into the season was a bit of a question mark with Christian Encarnacion Strand and Jamer Candelario. And Spencer Steers sort of cemented himself as the everyday first baseman for this team. And that's huge to have a guy over there that can play good, clean defense. And because he was a shortstop in college, he's making plays that a lot of first basemen don't have the range to make or don't have the athleticism to make. And he's making those plays with regularity. So, I'm I just think Spencer Steer playing the level of first base he's playing needs to be appreciated a little bit more. But that's all I have from this weekend. 3-game series, so not much to say.
Yeah, going back to Taylor Rogers, I feel like the Giants must have seen something in Rogers that the Reds didn't because,
Right.
like you said, they ate $6 million of that contract. And I believe Tyler Rogers is having a pretty good season for them
Yeah.
in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So it must have just
Yeah, they
been
must have known something.
known something that the Reds didn't.
Yeah.
Also, I when you were talking about Juan Soto, that made me think of a clip of him. Was it against the Reds this past weekend where he hit a ball like just barely foul, like
That was against
a few feet from the foul pole?
yeah, that would have been a game tying home run in game two of the series, and he hit it foul by probably less than 10 feet. Watching it live,
Wow.
I was pretty nervous watching it come off the bat live, and I thought it went fair at first too. The umpires even had to review it, but thankfully it was foul, and I think Emilio Pagan struck him out later that at bat. So a little gift from the baseball gods there.
Yeah, that's stressful. That brings back some really bad memories as a Guardians fan.
Yeah,
Um, Anyways, I'll get into some of my takeaways. So the Guardians played the American League version of the Nationals, in my opinion, the Sacramento Athletics, the redacted Philadelphia, Kansas City, Oakland, now
They have no
nothing.
home. They have no home.
Yeah, no home athletics, the unhoused athletics, if you will. But they did pretty much what they needed to do against the Athletics. They took 2 out of 3. Um, the Bats looked really good in game one and in game three, really. They scored 18 runs in 3 games. The only blemish was really game two. I mean, just as a whole, that game just sucked in general. But um, they really kind of rebounded in game three and made me sort of, th this team, yeah, they had a good weekend. Gavin Williams had a phenomenal start. Sunday in game three, he pitched 7 innings of 1 run ball. I believe he struck out 11 batters, and that was a career high for him. So, um, yeah, that's great. I feel like Gavin Williams has taken a lot of steps forward this season as far as just his ability to, uh, yeah, just maximize his stuff that he has because he has elite level stuff. It's just a matter of putting it together and being consistent. I think I'll get into it a little bit later because we have a question about Gavin Williams in our mailbag segment, but really good things that I saw from Gavin Williams yesterday. Um, Another takeaway I had is, Jonathan Rodriguez almost blew us that game in game one Friday where we were ahead 8-1 and it should have been a blowout. Slade Cecconi had one of the best starts that I've seen a Guardians and Indians starter have in several years. Pitched 8 1/3 innings. He gave up 6 runs. 3 of those were because of Jonathan Rodriguez. Let's be real here. Um, he was fantastic. He only struck out 2 batters, but he was averaging about 10 to 12 pitches per inning. And I thought he was going to go the distance, but unfortunately, Vogt kind of, yeah, Vogt challenged him, and I don't blame Vogt for challenging him to go out for the ninth. But the big issue I had with Vogt bringing Slade out for the ninth was that he didn't warm any bullpen arms up going into the ninth inning. So once Slade was struggling, he should have been out after the first batter got on. He should have been given a very short leash. But yeah, instead we didn't have anybody going in the bullpen, and we had to scramble to get Emmanuel Clase up. Um, so yeah, that was almost a disaster in game one, but luckily we held on. Yeah, like I said, Jonathan Rodriguez is a complete liability in the outfield. Um, Stephen Kwan missed the whole series. He's back in the lineup tonight. He had a wrist issue, which kind of opens up a big can of worms with Stephen Kwan because I was not happy about this. He played in the All-Star game and then he's out for 3 games with the wrist injury. That's just not a good look. I understand that Stephen Kwan is a couple years from being a free agent and he's trying to, boost his resume, get a second All-Star appearance. I get all that, but at the same time, you gotta be careful with stuff like that. Like you can't risk, especially because he stole a base. He had a couple of at bats. You swing a bat, that's so much impact on your wrist, especially when you're diving head first into second base, stealing bases. So um, yeah, there have been so many questionable situations over the years with Guardians players playing through injuries. Um, Yeah, especially wrist injuries. The wrist injuries are just weird with the Guardians organization because Chase DeLauter is kind of going through a similar situation with his wrist because he he had his I believe it was a hamstring issue he was out for a lot of the season with, and then he got hit by a pitch in practice and then he kind of ignored the injury for a while and then it just kind of slowly got worse. And then now he's on the IL and his ETA is pushed even farther back. So um I don't know with this athletic training staff for the Guardians. Somebody, I feel like somebody needed to step up there and, uh, do what was right. But, Kwan only missed a few games and he's back in the lineup tonight, so it didn't really hurt that much. We won 2 out of 3, so I can't really complain that much. But at the same time, it's just not a fantastic look for Stephen Kwan.
Yeah.
Love the guy, but one of my favorite players on the team. Um, but another big thing I noticed was that we, well, in the first and third games of that athletic series, we got contributions from a lot of different guys, especially, Will Wilson on Sunday had a multi-hit day. Austin Hedges had an RBI, and then Jonathan Rodriguez, as much as I hated on his defense, he hit a home run. He hit his first big league home run over the weekend, and he had another extra base hit yesterday that ended up being pretty crucial to really open the game up for the Guardians. So, um, but going back to Rodriguez's defense, I feel like I could play a better outfield than him. He takes terrible routes. He doesn't read the ball well. It just doesn't look like he really plays with any intensity out there. He just looks too casual. I don't know. It just looks like he could try a lot harder out there, and ultimately it's just not a great look. But yeah, that's really all I have for the Guardians this past weekend. Like I said, Baltimore is coming to town. The Orioles are 5-5 in their last 10 games, so they've been doing okay. We're facing Tomoyuki Sagano tonight, which he gave us a little bit of trouble last time he played the Guardians. But he's put up kind of league average stats this year. He's more of a pitch to contact guy, not a huge strikeout guy. So, um, yeah, that's not great for the way that the Guardians play because the Guardians do have a lot of soft contact, and
Mhm.
they kind of fell victim to having a lot of short at bats last time around against Sagano. So we'll have to wait and see how that goes. But um, tomorrow night we got for Tuesday we got Brandon Young for the Orioles. He has a 7.52 ERA and 6 starts and a 1.78 WHIP. So we should be able to hit Brandon Young pretty well. One thing about the Guardians this year that they have done well is beat the bad teams. Um, so I'm looking for a 3 out of 4 against the Orioles this week. We got Charlie Morton in game 3. We beat him up his first start, although he has been doing a little bit better. And then game 4 we got Dean Kramer, who is arguably their best starter this year. He's put up about league average stats in about every category. He's been sort of their ace, their workhorse, so to speak. Even though he's been kind of a step below Tanner Bybee in my opinion, for like the ace. So. Yeah, 115 innings pitched, 1.25 WHIP, 406 ERA. So, um, Guardians are still 4.5 games out of the wild card. So, sitting at 48 and 50. So, about the same as we were this time last week. So, um, yeah, overall, we'll have to keep doing what we need to do to beat these bad teams, and then hopefully we're back in this wild card race in a couple weeks. So I haven't lost faith yet, but we're still gonna need to be playing some really good baseball going forward. So, um, Jane, I think you have something to kind of add on to the Guardians situation this weekend or
Yeah,
overall.
well, first of all, I just want to say it's definitely going to be funny. I would like to go back and listen to all these episodes once the season is over and we know the results of the season because the week to week change is, I think, going to be hilarious because 2 weeks ago you were convinced the Guardians were the franchise might as well be moved to Nashville, and now here we are. You've got hope again. And I think that just goes to show like how funny a baseball season is when you're a fan of a team and you follow them closely like every day because things change so dramatically day to day. But yeah, there was an interesting graphic posted to Reddit that I saw the other day, and I don't know where this person got all this data from. I believe it was Fangraphs among some other sites, but basically the graphic was teams' production from their lineup compared to their payroll. So the Reds are seventh in this metric, and the Guardians are 12th, so they're both in the top half of the league. Both teams are getting more production from their lineups than what the payrolls suggest they should be getting. So I think that's a pretty interesting thing to see because we've seen a lot of complaints, especially in the last 2 years, about small market teams not being able to compete. And we're going to touch on that um, later on in the episode. But you know, the Reds are getting some of the best production for their payroll, as are the Guardians. The Rays are obviously the best team in baseball, and if you follow baseball outside of your favorite team and you sort of follow how organizations are run a little bit, you'll know that the Rays are one of the best teams in baseball at, keeping a very low payroll but getting a lot of production. And the Dodgers are third worst in this sort of um, metric that this person created. They're third worst in the league at this. So, they have a lot of money on the IL at this point in time, which is probably affecting that quite a bit. But I thought it was interesting to see that, there are these small market teams that are getting a lot of value for the money that they are spending. And that the little guy still can be, somewhat competitive in today's league.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they have to do. I think we're gonna get a lot more into it in our mailbag segment because we had a couple questions kind of regarding the small market's ability to be able to compete long term in this game.
Hmm.
And I think that, the Guardians last year were one of the best teams in baseball. Um, at kind of maximizing their payroll because they had like a top or a bottom five or bottom seven or eight or whatever payroll in the league last year,
Hmm.
and they won 92 games. And the Guardians this year are sitting about 500, and they have a little bit, like the 17th or 18th highest payroll in the MLB. So I believe they're
Right.
over the $100 million mark this year, with obviously a little bit worse results, but that's kind of to be expected in fluctuations year to year. Like you said, there's teams with a lot of players on the IL, so it's not a perfect stat for like how every organization is run, but it definitely does give a pretty good look into like, how teams are currently utilizing their roster and what they're getting out of it. So I think
Right.
that's
Yeah.
I think that's going to segue us well into our mailbag segment. So we have some red specific questions, we have some Guardian specific questions, and then we also have some kind of overarching questions regarding the state of the MLB. So, Jaden, why don't you get into a couple of your Reds questions here?
Yeah, so this first one here is what's it going to take for the Reds to be buyers at the deadline? And if they don't do anything at the deadline, can they still make the playoff push even without doing anything? And then this was a comment that came along with it. Even with all the frustration, this team feels different under Tito, and they're fun to watch again. So I feel like either way, they may be moving in the right direction to make something happen under his management. And I definitely agree with that. Tito has a track record of success wherever he's been. You saw it in Boston, you saw it in Cleveland. And, managers can't make all the difference, but they definitely do make some of the difference. And I think we're seeing that with the Reds this year. They're playing a much better brand of baseball that feels like you're watching nine guys play the same brand of baseball as opposed to David Bell, where it felt like guys were much more individualized in their approaches. Every guy was going up there to try and drive in a run. It wasn't, I'm going up here to try and get on base so another guy can drive me in. So I think Tito's made that change, and I think, that will be effective for this team. But, in response to what will it take for them to be buyers, I think so. We have the Nationals, the Rays, and the Dodgers before the deadline in this next 10 days. I think if they go 5-4 after they took two against the Mets, that would put them 7-5 in the post All-Star break pre-trade deadline stretch. Um, I think you can make a strong case for them to be buyers. I'd love to see them go 6-3, but it's hard to ask for a series win against the Dodgers. The granted we touched on it. The Dodgers are pretty depleted right now. Mookie Betts is having a pretty rough year, but I still think they are the Dodgers. They're the one of the best teams in the league. And so it feels hard to ask for a series win against them. But I think if you take the series against the Nationals and the Rays and you go 5-4, losing the series to the Dodgers, you can make a pretty strong case that this team needs to be buyers and that they're ready to be competitive this year. And in response to what are they going to do if they don't make any playoff or if they don't make any roster moves, can they still make a playoff push? We discussed this last episode a little bit, but the 2022 Guardians were in a very similar spot going into the All-Star break. They didn't make any big splash moves at the deadline, and they still won 91 games that year, I believe. And it feels like this team is in a very similar spot after watching this weekend's game. I know you sort of talked about it last week, but like 2022 was when the Guardians sort of created the guard ball mantra of running the bases well, playing that sort of small ball game a little bit, playing good defense. And it felt like this weekend in Queens, this team found their identity a little bit. They were hitting the ball the other way and up the middle, like I said, and trusting the guys behind them in the lineup. No one was trying to do too much. It was, I'm going to just let the guy behind me do what he needs to do if I can't get it done, or if I can't hit the home run, but I get on base, I know the guy behind me can drive me in. Um, so, while I would love to see them be buyers, I think there's a real chance that they are buyers. Um, I don't think it's necessary for them to be competitive this year. Um, Another question we got about the Reds was when will Hunter Green return? So he threw 30 pitches in Arizona last week, and he's scheduled to make a rehab start in the league before he goes to Louisville. And hopefully this time there are no bumps in the road with his rehab stuff. And I think if there aren't any bumps in the road, he's going to want to make probably 2 to 3 rehab starts in Louisville after um, making that rehab start in the complex league. So I think by early to mid August is when we see him. And I think that sets the team up well to make a push. You could possibly move Nick Martinez to the bullpen and have him to help cover innings during the Chase Burns starts. They're not going to let Chase Burns go very deep into games. So having a guy like Nick Martinez who can um, cover some of those innings in the bullpen, I think would be super valuable. Another question we got is this the true Noelvi Marte? Will we see him continue his success that he's having early on this season? And I think, it's hard to say. There are some metrics that like what he's doing, but at the same time, he missed so much time last year and he wasn't very good when he came back from his suspension. And, this year has been promising at times, but um injuries have sort of made his season fairly inconsistent. Like I said, there are some underlying stats that point to his continued success. He's got an above league average expected slug, average exit velo, bat speed, squared up percent, and strikeout percent. All of those are above league average, and his BABIP is at 280. So he might be getting a little bit unlucky. That 280 BABIP is close to league average, but maybe a little bit low. Um, so yeah, there are definitely some underlying metrics that like what Noelvi Marte is doing. The eye test also has been pretty promising, I think. He's taking good ABs and he's swinging it, his pitches for the most part. He's not really chasing a lot of things. I think, I think it all points to him having similar success to what he's having now. I don't think we see success like what he was having in 2023 after he got called up, but I think we can expect this to be um, a very similar Noelvi Marte to what I think we can expect him to be a very similar Noelvi Marte to what we're seeing now. There is some swing and miss stuff, but he's a good power bat, and the swing and miss won't kill you like it will with Reese Hines or someone like that who's swinging and missing it pretty much everything and will make contact one in every 30 pitches. He also played right field for the first time yesterday. Now, he was signed as a shortstop. He came up as a third baseman in the organization, though. But, like we've mentioned before, shortstops are guys that are highly athletic, and he has a great arm over at third. And so, putting that out in right field is definitely a good thing. He made a really good throw to home yesterday out in right field. He didn't get the runner, but it was a really, really good throw. I'm sort of sitting here daydreaming that they're moving him off third because they know a trade for Eugenio Suarez is coming, and they want Noelvi to get comfortable in the outfield so they can keep his bat in the lineup when they get Eugenio to play third. that's not very likely. The Reds aren't going to be able to outbid all the other teams that want Eugenio. But I'll dream about it until he goes somewhere else or the trade deadline passes and he's still a Diamondback. And then the last Reds one we have is why isn't Ellie running this year? Is there an underlying issue that the fan base doesn't know? So there's this narrative that Ellie isn't really running much this year, and um, he's definitely not running as much as he has in the past, but he's still running quite a bit. He has 25 stolen bases. He's 99th percentile in base running run value. I think the difference this year and why people are concerned is that he's not creating runs by stealing, but he's taking extra bases. So, and I think this is the effect of Tito being the manager. Last year, Ellie was sort of allowed to run wild, and he led the league in caught stealing. That means he wasn't on base for guys to bring him in. And I think there was some strategy to that because the offense wasn't very good last year. So Ellie needed to take those extra bases to be able to score. And this year that isn't the case so much. Right now he's third in the league in runs scored at 72. And all of last year he scored 105 runs. So just a little bit of context there. So, all of this to say that he's still running, but it's smarter and more calculated this year. Ellie doesn't need to be on second to score on a ball in the gap. He can score from first on a ball in the gap. So why risk the steal? Why risk getting thrown out? Because then you're not getting that run. So, I think Tito has taught him to realize that. And now he's creating runs by using his speed to take extra bases on hits that other guys wouldn't be able to get the extra base on. And I think, we're just seeing his game mature and we're not seeing him steal as much, but he's still creating a lot of value with his speed. It's just in a different way.
Yeah, I have a few Guardians questions to answer as well. So my first one is does Will Wilson have a future with the Guardians? My short answer is no, but for the rest of the season, I think he's gonna be here to stay. The thing is with Will Wilson that we just don't really have any good options at second base right now because Juan Brito has a hamstring strain right now. Gabriel Arias looks to be making pretty good progress in his recovery. So we could see Gabriel Arias back within the next few weeks, which that would be amazing. I think that would really be the only caveat to Will Wilson not being on this team the rest of the year is Gabriel Arias getting healthy. And then Travis Bazzana is I believe he's back in Akron. He rehabbed in the Arizona Complex League for I believe a week or two. And now he's back and fully healthy with Akron. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see how he does the rest of the season. But yeah, second base is kind of a disaster right now, as it has been for the last since Jimenez got traded. So um, I think Arias did a really nice job um, covering shortstop this year, especially when Rocchio was underperforming a little bit. Now Rocchio is doing a lot better since he came back up. Gabriel Arias is back on his way. So yeah, Will Wilson does not have a future with this team. He's merely a placeholder, thankfully. Seems like a great guy, but just not a big league caliber player. Next question is about Gavin Williams. Do you think Gavin Williams is capable of repeating his performance from this weekend? Throughout the whole season. I think most definitely he is. He has probably the highest ceiling of anybody on this starting pitching staff. Um, I think we saw a lot. We've been seeing really good things from Slade Cecconi recently. However, I think Gavin Williams has a slightly higher upside to, the way he pitches. He's just a big dude and he's able to throw 100 miles an hour. And he can comfortably throw 95 to 96 and he's been able to command 95 to 96 really, really well. Um, so, looking for him, that's all he really needs to do. If you can command 95 to 96 super well, and then mix in a deceptive curveball, which he has a really good curveball. He's integrated a cutter as well. He's taken a lot of steps forward this season, and I think, barring an injury, he can make a run at being the ace of the staff for the next few years to come. So, I think this season he's really been his own worst enemy. The teams that he faces don't, he's given up a lot of leadoff home runs this year, but for the most part, they people don't really hit the ball off him that much. They just the hits kind of come at inopportune times, and that is because of the walks and just kind of the self-inflicted mistakes that he makes throughout a game. So I think he's maturing right in front of our eyes, and I'm excited to see what he does. Going forward. So I think we have 3 or 4 more years of Gavin Williams under control. So um, I feel good about him. Can the starting pitching staff maintain their high performance? Yeah, I think they could even go up from here, Um, the Luis Ortiz situation is definitely very unfortunate. He's suspended through the end of next month. He was showing a lot of upside. He's kind of progressed in a similar way that Gavin Williams has progressed this season. He's sort of found his stride a little bit. He's gotten very unlucky with the run support that he's gotten. Some can claim that that's gambling induced lack of run support. The tinfoil hat wearers can really go to town on that one, but I think that the point I'm trying to make is that Luis Ortiz has a lot of upside. Um, like I said, Gavin Williams is ace type of stuff, and Tanner Bybee has had a tough season. He hasn't really been the pitcher that he was the last couple years, and he's been tinkering with a lot of things this year. He's made a lot of adjustments, and some of them haven't really paid off immediately, and that's kind of to be expected when you make adjustments in the middle of the season. But he has shown a willingness uh to improve and learn. And I think that's a very valuable trait in a pitcher. And it'll pay off for him eventually as long as he kind of stays the course. Yeah, he's had to face a lot of demons this year. And I hopefully he could take a big step forward next year and start to really put some things together. Because we saw the pitcher that he can be the last couple seasons. So and also going along with the rotation, Joey Cantillo looks to be a super promising back of the rotation piece going forward. Logan Allen has been fine this year, but I think that Allen has uh, almost kind of tapped into his ceiling as a pitcher. I think his ceiling as a pitcher is like, Matthew Boyd. He has Matthew Boyd type of upside. That's if he really gets his command down. Matthew Boyd is really sort of uh the cream of the crop, crafty left-handed pitcher this year. And this is really the best season Boyd has had in his career. So, um, but yeah, Logan Allen has done a nice job this year, is what I'm trying to say. And then Shane Bieber, and the next question I have regarding the Guardians is when is Shane Bieber coming back? And his ETA right now is early to mid-August. He had a rehab start in the Arizona Complex League last week. He threw 32 pitches. So it's going to be a while till he gets lengthened out to 90 to 100 pitches, but he is scheduled for another rehab start at a to be determined affiliate. At least as of last night, it's to be determined. He might have gotten scheduled for a start since then, but yeah, he's making rehab starts right now. So hopefully we'll see Shane Bieber at least back on the team in the next few weeks. Could see him out of the bullpen, could see him make, like a 3 to 4 inning start and then see Cantillo come out of the bullpen or something and get a few innings there. But I'm excited to see Shane Bieber back for however long he's able to be in a Guardians uniform. So now we have some sort of questions for both of us, which I was really looking forward to. The first question we have is, will there be a salary cap in baseball as the rumors are speculating in the next agreement, which is prior to the 2027 season? And do you think it would be good for the game? So, what I have to say about this is there's definitely a spending gap that's super wide in MLB. I think that's very hard to ignore. Really only the large market teams can land the big free agents, which makes sense, but it's kind of frustrating and it gets old after a while. It makes the game obviously a lot less fair. Um, and it's getting a little old to know that small market teams don't really have a shot at these prominent free agent pieces at between seasons or the major guys on the trading block coming into a deadline. You really like there are exceptions here, but um, most blockbuster trades now are like the Cubs, Yankees, Dodgers, the Astros, those type of teams. Um, for now, like we kind of touched on with the small market teams doing a lot with a little, that's what the small market teams have had to really do to keep up with these larger market teams is really lean into the analytics and just get really creative with how they use their assets in an organization. And part of that is being really cheap and not really putting your players and fans as the first priority. So um, I also think that the impending lockout in 27 comes at a very unfortunate time with the A's not having a permanent home and then the Rays also having a very unstable situation with their team. So yeah, I think that's just going to kind of add to the the conflict in the next year and a half. Um, and yeah, there's the salary cap, which limits what a player can make throughout his career, which players definitely would not stand for. That definitely adds to the conflict as well, with the MLB not being able to come to an agreement with the players. Um, I've my take on this is that there's a luxury tax in the MLB, so if you spend a certain amount of money, then you have to basically pay that back. So there, yeah, that's kind of acting as a salary cap and impacting teams such as the Dodgers, who they owe hundreds of millions of dollars in luxury tax already. And what I think needs to be done short term is doing away with deferring contracts. I think the Dodgers have really taken advantage of deferring contracts and gotten players to come to their team. And it's not just the Dodgers, but the Dodgers have the most famous examples of this is getting players to come to their teams for a pay cut, and then they get a certain amount of guaranteed money after their contract is over, and they get paid into their 40s and 50s. And that seems like a good gig for players who really want to win now, and aging players who are at the end of their prime who really want to get a World Series ring. So that just kind of adds to the competitive imbalance, I think. I think having the luxury tax is ultimately not a bad thing for the MLB, and adding adding regulations to deferring deferring contracts, I think, is a good healthy medium going forward. So
Yeah,
um,
I want to touch on the salary cap thing that you mentioned, and you know how players aren't going to stand for this. It's already pretty obvious that the players' union is gearing up for a big fight against a salary cap because Rob Manfred has come out and talked about a salary cap, and then the players' union has come out and said, we're not gonna agree to a salary cap, basically. So. Yeah, that makes me think, we're heading probably towards a lockout if they try to do a salary cap. But, what I've seen suggested that the MLB should do a salary floor, and I think that I like that better. You know, a salary cap is nice, but in theory, guys could still take just less money to play on a stacked team. I mean, we see it in the NBA, guys will just play for less money or get traded to a different team, and the salary cap doesn't really help a whole lot. What the salary floor does is it forces owners to spend a set amount of money because all of these owners have the money to spend at least like a middle of the pack payroll team, and they don't do it for one reason or another. um a guy like the Pirates owner is I don't know his net worth, but I know that he's worth way more than he's ever going to spend on that team, or way more than he ever could realistically spend on that team. So what a salary floor would do is force some of these owners to either sell the team or start ponying up some money. Um, and I think that that might be the better option. That way, you're not in a fight with the players union. I think the players union would definitely go for a salary floor more. But then it becomes a problem with the owners and if they're willing to agree to that, and I don't think all of them will, but it definitely just feels like there's no easy solution to this. And like you mentioned, there's still quite a bit of parity in the MLB. It's not like the NFL or the NBA where it seems to be the same four teams every year are contending. Um, and I think, more than anything, what I would like to see is that franchises have a chance to retain their stars. As a Reds fan, I know that Ellie's gone in 2029. There's nothing that anyone in the organization is going to be able to do about it. It's coming down to basically, is Ali De La Cruz willing to take probably, a couple $100 million less than what he is worth? And with his agent, I don't think that's going to happen. But that's what I would just like to see teams be able to retain these star players that they either sign at a young age out of the international pool, or that they draft out of college or high school and work all these years developing, and then they get to the big leagues and you get 5 years of them and then they're gone. And so small market franchises, they don't really have that franchise cornerstone player. I mean, it was Joey Votto for the Reds, and now it's, who knows if we'll ever see another one in Cincinnati. It's Jose for the Guardians,
Mhm.
and who knows if you'll ever see another Jose. um, there isn't really, gone are the days of franchise legends. It feels like, guys like Johnny Bench who were in Cincinnati their entire career, or Pete Rose who were in Cincinnati for the majority of their career. There, it feels like we're never going to see that again, which I think really sucks. I think it sucks for small market fans more than anything, because you come to love these young prospects that you've seen blossom into these superstars for your team, and then right when they get to the peak of their career, I mean, Ellie is really finding his footing this year, and he's only going to continue to get better with the talent that he has. And then when he gets to be the best version of himself as a ball player, he's gone. So that really sucks, and I think that's my biggest issue with how MLB salary and payroll works.
Yeah, I was thinking about what you said with the salary floor, and I don't really the sucky thing is that I don't really know what can be done to make small market teams be able to retain their stars. Because I think
Right,
you see that, not only outside of baseball, but just in the professional world in general, people have a lot less company loyalty because they've come to realize their worth. And
right.
if they're given an opportunity that sets them and their family up better than their old, company or employer or team in this instance would do, then they would jump on that in an instant. I think that people are a lot less a lot less tied down with where they came
Hmm.
up, and a little bit more willing to move, especially with uh our ability to communicate across the country and be able to,
Right.
especially in their situation where they're able to travel freely and not have to worry about money. So um,
Yeah.
I think that that is sort of unfortunately a reflection of what how the world has evolved. And like you said, kind of it's a dying breed of the players are who wear one uniform for their whole career, and
Hmm.
they're going to get a statue put up um, at whatever team they were legend of. And yeah, you're not. I don't think this franchise is ever going to see a guy who's willing to take hundreds of millions of dollars of a pay cut to stay with the franchise they came up with.
Right.
So. Yeah, it does kind of suck, but that's just the way that the world is evolving. So,
Yeah.
um,
And
yeah.
another thought that just popped into my head, you know, there can be the Rays are a prime example of this, where they know that they're operating on a small budget, and so the front office baseball guys, not necessarily the owners, but are notorious the year that they're going into track year. So they're not in the Rays. They were willing to trade Randy, who is a big part of their franchise, and to operate like this, but they have to operate like this in terms of the constraints that they have with their payroll.
Yeah, I caught about 75% of what you said because my internet is unstable. But we'll go ahead and move on to our next question, which is what is one MLB/baseball conspiracy you believe in? And if you listen to the podcast, you guys know that we both are big conspiracy theorists, but I'd say that I'm a little bit I buy into conspiracies a little bit more readily than Jaden does, but um the biggest one that I buy into as a baseball fan is that the MLB doctors baseballs to fix outcomes. Um, you see this year to year. I've already touched on it with the juice ball era in the MLB, where the MLB saw the most home runs more home runs in a season that the steroid era had. And that's no accident. They figured out that if they move the seams in a certain way, then they can get less drag on the ball, um, which can cause the ball to go farther. So it's all about just manipulating that drag coefficient for whatever outcome they want to see the next season, whether that's more offense, better pitching, whatever's going to boost their ratings. And I think to take it a step farther. This is a little bit more out there, and I've kind of hinted at this before, but I think that the Guardians were given different baseballs to hit with than the Yankees were in the ALCS last year. I have a hard time believing that that ball that John Kenzie Noel hit, it looked like he hit it 470 feet into the bleachers, and it ended up being 20 feet in front of the warning track. The sound off the bat was super loud, and it looked exactly like that one that he hit, that famous one that he hit to tie the game, and I think it was game three of the ALCS. Then Fry walked it off, but. Yeah, I think that the MLB most definitely does fix outcomes.
Mm.
And I think even outside of the baseballs, because there was D. Strange Gordon came on a podcast this past week, and he said that he was the 2015 or he won the 2015 batting title for the National League, and he was the last day of the season. It was between him and Bryce Harper, and he ended up having a 3 for 4 day. It came out this week that the MLB told D. Strange Gordon to throw the batting title so that Bryce Harper could win a triple crown. Um,
Well, that's what he alleges.
that's what he alleges. That yeah, big emphasis on alleges. I think he lost a lot of credibility when he brought the race card into it. With all due respect, but it is an interesting concept that the MLB is willing to tell players to play a certain way for an outcome that they want. And it makes me think that there are other instances where that has happened. The MLB, yeah, I think they've been fixing outcomes in so many ways over the years. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's what I
Um,
have.
this kind of segues well into mine, but the D. Strange Gordon's alleged story is that his steroid suspension that he got in 2016 was because he was unwilling to throw the batting title. And if you've seen D. Strange Gordon, he doesn't look like a guy that's ever taken steroids.
Yeah.
But his claim was that that suspension was not steroid related, but was repercussions from the MLB for not letting Harper win the batting title that year. But anyway, so my conspiracy theory, this is not an MLB, I guess kind of MLB, but more baseball. And I'm taking this one from my grandpa. But Michael Jordan retired from basketball to play baseball in 1993 because he got caught gambling. So, it's come out since Jordan has retired that he is a pretty avid gambler. But he was the biggest star in the NBA in the 90s, so they couldn't afford to lose their biggest star. So instead of giving him a suspension and outing him for for gambling on games or whatever, for gambling on whatever he was gambling on and suspending him for that. They told him to retire and go play baseball for a year, and that would serve as his suspension. And I think that what gives this weight is that it doesn't really make sense for Jordan, who we've seen is a very fierce competitor. He wants to win. I think, if you watch the Last Dance documentary, you saw how much winning and being a competitor meant to him. It doesn't make a lot of sense for him to retire at the top of his game just because, he felt like, oh, I've won 3 consecutive titles. What more do I need to accomplish? I'm going to go play a sport that obviously I'm not very good at in baseball. So yeah, that's my conspiracy theory is that Michael Jordan was forced to go play baseball for a year to cover a gambling suspension.
I could definitely see that being a reality. I haven't really looked into that super deeply, but
Mhm.
I don't imagine that there's many, holes in that conspiracy theory. Um, I think there's a pretty legitimate way that you could debunk a lot of conspiracy theories out there, and I don't know, maybe I just choose to ignore them, but yeah, I think that one has the potential to be pretty, a lot more bulletproof than others. So um,
Yeah.
unless you have anything to add, that's where we're going to end today's episode. So um, yeah, thank you for listening today. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube. This will be going up on YouTube, and make sure to share with family and friends, anybody who would enjoy the podcast. And thank you so much, and we'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, thanks. See ya.